This is the Dreadful Podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're back with part 8 of our Penny Dreadful retrospective, talking about Season 3, Episodes 7 to 9. Welcome back, fellow Penny Faithful. This is TV Podcast Industries. We're talking about Penny Dreadful Season 3, Episodes 7 to 9, the 8th and final part in our retrospective series on Penny Dreadful, leading into the release of Penny Dreadful City of Angels. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hello there, fellow Darklings. I am one of your other horrific hosts, John.
You're not that horrific.
No, I'm not that horrific.
No.
I'm actually quite a nice guy in real life.
And I know we don't do a video podcast, but you're definitely not horrific.
No, exactly. I don't look like the creature.
Oh, poor John Clare.
I know.
He also doesn't look that horrific. He gets a nice hairdo this time after a couple of years of not seeing her, and you notice that he's really kind of getting himself done up to revisit his wife for the first time.
Definitely. And of course, with growing his hair out long, then he can always comb it over so it hides the kind of more damaged side of his face.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. We're going to jump in with our discussion about Ebb Tide, the 7th episode of Season 3. As you know, we've been releasing these episodes over on Patreon feed first, and then releasing each individual episode over on dreadfulpodcast.com, our podcast all about Penny Dreadful, everything over there. And then the full discussions in each of our big parts where we talk about episodes 7 through to 9, we're releasing on tvpodcastindustries.com, the home for all of our podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us throughout this run-through of Penny Dreadful.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks for all the support. It's really been good rewatching these episodes. And sure, it's kind of a labor of love as well, I think.
Yeah.
But it is all with the lead up to Penny Dreadful City of Angels out on the 26th of April. Yeah, really looking forward to seeing how that sort of takes forward the concepts from Penny Dreadful, these original 3 seasons. Of course, it's going to be very different, but yeah, really looking forward to getting into that. And of course, with the current COVID crisis, I suppose it's one of the few sort of productions that were in the bag ready to go, so it is sticking to its schedule. A lot of other stuff that certainly that we will be covering this year is going to be delayed through the production issues and the requirement to socially distance one another from each other. I got a little confused there.
Yeah,
to social distance, effectively.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good that this was in the bag, and we can kick on with City of Angels when it comes out towards the end of April.
Exactly. Now, this is kind of the first retrospective series that we've done, isn't it? We did Agent Carter, I think, after the first full season had aired, but we'd never done a series like this where we'd gone back through 3 full seasons of the show and gone through every episode. So a big undertaking to go through it. So once again, thank you to our patrons for all of our support and all of our wonderful listeners for listening along with these episodes. I hope you've enjoyed going back to, I suppose, one of the seminal horror series that have been released. So,
exactly. Yeah. And I think as well, for all of those people who maybe didn't ever consider Penny Dreadful on their radar, that they have decided they would give it a go, give it a watch, and hopefully have enjoyed the series, at least however far they got into it, and have enjoyed the discussion podcasts that go with it. And maybe are considering City of Angels, which they may not have done previously. But certainly it'll be new episodes to be released. So yes, enough of the football rewatch, the rugby union rewatches. Yes, all the repeats that are happening. I think I've seen Red 2, the movie, as well as Sausage Party, the movie, and I think there was another one as well. I think they have just been on constantly on some of the network cable channels of late, and It does feel like being caught in Groundhog's Day a bit.
It does make it even worse, isn't it? Because you don't know what day is Tuesday, and then the same movie that you were watching on Tuesday is back on TV on Thursday or Friday, so you're completely confused as to what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. So we should celebrate new work, new releases coming out during this time.
Absolutely.
Given that they may get fewer and farther between depending on how long this continues.
Exactly. Let's get into our discussion about episode 7, Ebb Tide. The episode was directed once again by Paco Cabezas and written by showrunner John Logan, with staff writers Andrew Hinderaker and Krysty Wilson-Cairns, all involved in previous episodes of this season of the show and the future episodes of the final season of Penny Dreadful. John, do you want to give us the summary for this episode of Penny Dreadful?
Sure. Kaetenay has visions of Vanessa in danger, which prompts Sir Malcolm and Ethan to travel back to London. The creature returns to his wife, Marjorie, and son on the advice of Vanessa. Lily sends her assembled army of women out to kill, which disturbs Dorian. Meanwhile, Catriona Hartigan helps Vanessa discover that Dracula's identity is Dr. Sweet and tells her he can be killed when he is in human form. The disturbed Dorian delivers Lily to Victor so that he can administer the serum he has been working on with Dr. Jekyll. As night falls, Vanessa confronts Dr. Sweet at the Natural History Museum, but he convinces her to join him, and she succumbs to his bite.
Yes, a pretty shocking ending to Ebb Tide.
Yeah, definitely.
In many ways, actually.
Really interesting thing. It really did feel as though Vanessa was just like, I am sick to death of this cat and mouse chase now at this stage. Or it's, we've seen her power with the Verbus Diablo against the witches. We saw her using it again in the flashback episode, A Blade of Grass. So, there is this darkness within her that seemingly, she is aligned to the light side, if you will, to God, it feels. She's connected to that religion, yet it's as though she is a vessel for evil that is used by the forces of good, in a sense, to attack the forces of darkness. And, but it seems as though maybe it's been too much for her body, her mind, the effort to, contain this, to be subjected to these attacks. And it really felt like a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
However, despite that, there was also, an earlier meeting between her and Dr. Hartigan where I felt, Catriona Hartigan says it's not the time for a warrior like myself, that it's more like you need to be a spy to infiltrate. It felt like she was going down this route to infiltrate into Dracula's nest and den so that she can effectively destroy it from within, I felt as well. So not just simply, let's get this over and done with kind of thing, but it felt like it was a strategy of hers as well.
Yeah. I had commented before that the offer that was coming from Lucifer and Dracula, where they were saying to her, stand by my side and we will purge the earth effectively of humans, those offers felt like they were very odd because it didn't feel like Vanessa would be the type of person that would align themselves with someone that was going to burn down the earth and kill all the humans. I kind of like Dr. Sweet's offer to her in this episode, which was everybody in the past has wanted you to be something that you're not, to force yourself to be good, to force yourself to be this kind, polite, kind of bidden woman standing by the side of other people. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to live the way you want to live, and I will support you. And it felt like a completely different offer almost. And it felt like something that Vanessa would kind of go, actually, I've been fighting for 25 years here to be what everybody else wants me to be. I can be myself with this guy. It almost did feel like a proper acceptance of the offer here, which made more sense as we got to the end of this season than I thought it would, actually, first time around. But let's get into our big moments from the episode. As you know, we choose a moment that we want to talk about that kind of speaks to the overarching storyline of the season and the big thing that stands out to us from the episodes. John, do you want to kick us off with your big moment from episode 7?
Yes, I'll start it with a quote. You are a great fertile bitch of evil. Yes, Kaetenay of the Hills, to give him his full title, connects through the spiritual world again on the boat back to London to connect with and visit Vanessa. And I just thought this was really nicely done. I love the fact that we see Vanessa in Sir Malcolm's house in the study, and she senses that there is a spiritual presence there. Looks around, there's no one, turns around again, and there is Kaetenay. And I love this interaction between the two. And I thought it was really nicely done. I love that in Kaetenay's foretelling, he effectively describes not only the dragon, he knows of this dragon that Katrina Hodgson had previously revealed one of the names by which Dracula goes by, but in his conversation with her, he describes, the night that Vanessa seems to have had previously with Dr. Alexander Sweet, and her unknown but willing embrace of her adversary, here. The master. And I love that. He talks about being surrounded by night crawlers gathering around you. And that these creatures, this surrounding makes you drunk with love. But don't be deceived. They are false lovers. Speaking of the love scene with the master, because at that moment she didn't know that it was Dracula, her adversary, basically. So I really like this. I mean, he doesn't effectively tell her, but it is coded speak to her saying, be wary of this. And I think it's probably a nice thing that in her then later meeting with Catriona, where the penny finally drops, that part of this connection, the spiritual connection that Kaetenay had with Vanessa, was part of the thing that helped her to make those and connect those dots. I think Kaetenay as well kind of brings that duality about Vanessa as he's speaking to her. You were made for the day, Vanessa, not the night. It's that hopeful side. And yet he also says you're the woman of all our dreams and night terrors. That if she goes willingly, then we're all knackered, basically. We're doomed. Yeah. And he comes out of this, informing Ethan and Sir Malcolm that she is halfway his already. We get that great moment where her eyes go red in that spiritual connection that they have. Yeah. So again, I just thought this was really nicely done. I've loved all these moments with Kaetenay where he goes into that spiritual world. It's really, great stuff, for me. I really like actually that they use the Native American language here, the Apache, for him and Ethan to have their conversation. I think that's really nicely done. Yeah. And I think it's great little touches like that. They don't need to do that, but I think it really adds something to then the connection between Ethan and Kaetenay as well, even though, it's not necessarily the most straightforward of relationships that these two have. But certainly, I like that connection. So again, this was just really nice, and I liked how it sort of foretold the penny dropping with Vanessa. It reveals that moment where she gives herself willingly to the master whilst unknown that he is Dracula. Yeah, exactly. I do love that conversation between Ethan and Kaetenay, where Ethan is kind of saying, I'm going back to London now, I'm done. I've had all my fill of Americans and everything that's happened over there with his family, and he's finally saying, I'm going back over there. And he says his family's dead, his tribe is dead, and his real tribe now is his family over in England. I love the discussion because it ends with effectively Kaetenay saying to him, you may think you're done, but your job here is to fight off all of the darkness and all the demons. Your job won't be done until all of the demons are gone. He has that vision of Ethan returning to London and meeting Vanessa, and we have that great shock moment as the vampires are cracking through the windows of the house where Malcolm lived. Exactly. I think it's a really good moment between the two of them, and again showing the foretelling of what Ethan is supposed to do. He's not supposed to live out a good life with a good woman. He's supposed to battle the demons until the demons are gone, or he is. Yeah, and it's really one of those things where, we learn a little bit more about these two, where Kaetenay is saying, I have claimed you as my own. You are an Apache. And I think this is a really it's that nice touch. They're not blood relatives, but there is a connection there. And I think as we move forward through these episodes, we certainly get that hint of what that is in a really cool way for me. So I really like this this connection here. I also like, I have to bring it up, that Renfield almost gets in a sneaky little snack, on Vanessa until, Dracula, kind of intervenes, to say, not on my watch. She's all my snacks, basically.
Absolutely. I was laughing because in the last episode you discussed about the fact that after Dr. Sweet and Vanessa had sex in the Natural History Museum, that maybe one of the co-workers might arrive the following morning and it wouldn't be very good for Dracula. Turns out it's Renfield that turns up. But he does mention it, doesn't he? Dr. Sweet actually says, I've got some tea downstairs. We better make ourselves scarce before the other employees arrive in. So good call, John.
Yeah, definitely. Derek, what's your big moment of episode 7?
I think there's a big choice between one or the other on this one. But I think Dorian's story with Lily is going to come into the next episode. So I'm going to talk about that in notes this time because there's some big moments in there. One that I particularly wanted to talk about in this episode was John Clare returning to his family. Partly because it did answer the question that I had last episode about the flashback where John Clare actually had been an attendant to Vanessa while she was in the Banning clinic. And I'd wondered whether she remembered or knew that John Clare was the same person as the attendant. So I was quite happy, really, that they have this wonderfully poignant discussion between Vanessa and John Clare, where he's thinking about maybe going back to his wife, but knowing that she may reject him, just like his son did when he saw what he looked like. I thought it was a beautiful discussion between the two of them, where Vanessa questions whether he remembers being the orderly, and says to him, I personally think that the man who took care of me deserves to be loved. He was a beautiful man, and I'd never been treated as well as someone like him. I fell in love with him. And if your wife loves you as much as I did, the attendant or the orderly, then you should go back to her. I think it's a lovely kind of wrapping up of what's happened with the monster for so many seasons. He's been trying to find his place, and he's been basically given permission from Vanessa to go and re-find his place with his family.
Yeah, I like the fact that she says, well, what harm can it do? You feel so sort of devoid of any attachment other than her and him. Then make that bold move. Just ask. You've got nothing further to lose. If she rejects you, then you stay the same where you are. If she accepts you, then things have changed for the better. Exactly. So make that bold move. I really liked that. I also thought it was really nice in that it felt connected to the previous episode with Dr. Seward saying, you need to surround yourself with friends, and Katrina Hartigan as well. So, that whole idea that Dracula predates on the solitary, tries to isolate you. And in effect, too late, she's gone to the right friend, which is John Clare. He is the right friend at this time that she should have gone to. And instead she went to someone who she didn't know for as long and ultimately is the devil in disguise. And so I really kind of liked that element of this as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That would have been the right person to go to. We've said, Dr. Seward probably gave good advice, but sent her on the wrong path by her going to Dr. Sweet, But what I did like about this scene is that we do get the follow-up. We get John Clare going back to Marjorie, his wife. And I love that he tells her the entire story. You get snippets of it from the discussion, but you know that he's told Marjorie the entire story about him not being a willing participant and being brought back to life. He says to her that he's walked in darkness and can never be the same person. Yeah. He is a completely different person than she knew in the past, but he still wants to reconnect with her and his son Jack. And then a beautiful moment as he's reintroduced by Marjorie to their son Jack, preparing him for how terrifying the moment might be. And as John Clare slowly reintroduces himself to Jack, we get that lovely moment where Jack touches his hand and then gives him a hug, realizing it is still his father. I think it's a lovely, poignant scene that we have here with John Clare and the family reunited.
Yeah, these are really touching and they're so well played, because John Clare's had this rejection all his life, and you are wondering what's his wife going to do. But I love the fact that, she hugs him and she's accepting. It's really touching. And then to top it all off, previously when his son Jack saw his dad, he screamed.
Yeah.
But this time Jack just comes in and touches his hand, and they hug. I just thought this was so good because John Clare has had rejection after rejection after rejection, after betrayal, effectively, in all his time as the creature, after being reanimated by Victor.
Yeah.
With the exception of Vanessa, and here the people who were his past are willing to be their future, even though with Jack's situation having the cough, you suspect it's not going to be for very long.
Oh, yeah.
So even in that, there is some tragedy for poor John Clare.
But he wants to be by his boy's side, and anything he can do to help him out, he wants to be there for him. We saw that even when his son was screaming, when he saw him for the first time, he was saying, "I will steal medicine if it keeps you maintained," Very importantly, you need to underline here that Marjorie's reaction to his full story, even though he's told her about all of the pain that he's gone through, her reaction is praise for Victor Frankenstein for bringing him back to their family. And he's kind of shocked at the idea that she would praise him. But of course she would, because he's alive and back to her now, and life will be better with John Clare at her side. But I thought it was quite interesting, the reaction of him kind of going, "But you don't understand, he's an abomination. He made me into a monster. The person that you see before you is a monster, and I've had to live with this and being unable to return to you." And she just kind of says, "Well, yeah, I don't care. You're back." So Victor is a god to me almost. Victor's someone to be thanked for what he's done. So just an interesting point to close off.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
moment.
And I mean, that little snippet has a consequence in the final episode.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting thing because it ultimately reverses all that rejection that John Clare has had in the past, where he has to make the choice of rejection.
Yeah.
So it is a very important moment in this episode where she almost enthuses about Victor in what he's been able to do and thanks him for it. So yeah, really, really interesting stuff.
I suppose Victor effectively is getting the praise that he always expected to get for piercing the veil between life and death, I suppose. So even though he's not there, he is getting praised from someone for his work.
Yeah.
That's my major note, but it is our podcast. We can choose to talk about another note. And I think we should.
Yes, we have to, I think, for sure.
Which really is, and I will fix this in post, don't worry, John. Dorian is isn't he?
Yes, he is. Dorian is at his most dangerous when he gets bored, and, he is getting very, very bored of Lily and her girls, and what they ultimately want to do. And I think it gets teased out over the next few episodes, but this is kind of the start of it here.
Yeah.
In fact, she even asks him after he's arranged for her to be kidnapped by Victor and Dr. Jekyll. She asks him, Lily, are you jealous? And he goes, no, I'm bored. That's his response to Lily. And, quite rightly, she's massively angry. I think the really interesting thing here is just the words that come from Dorian and effectively the sentiment of Dr. Jekyll as well as Victor Frankenstein at this time, where we're going to make you into a proper woman. It really is that misogyny of saying, we know how women should be. This is what you will become to fit our view. What you are is something that doesn't fit our own perception of how women should be. This strong woman fueled by her pain of her past that has made her the person who she is, and who wants to hold on to that because she realizes the importance of it being the trials, the tribulations that have brought her to this point where she knows herself knows who she is, what she wants to be, and how she wants to behave. And what's added to that is a very striking image at the start with Lily at a cemetery commenting on a lady burying her baby. To find that she too had lost a child early, whilst still under 1 year of age, and she was visiting her daughter's grave. And this also is something that we didn't know about while she was Brona. But over the course of the next few episodes, in this confined, forced place that she's been brought to by Dorian, and which Dr. Jekyll and Victor are impressing their own knowledge and process on her with this serum to change her.
I have to say, I love that line in the cemetery when she's talking to the woman and saying to her, the day a good woman will have to suffer the indignity of a starved child is almost over. Taking it away from what's actually on the screen and what we're seeing and what's being said by Dorian, he's scared. He's scared of what power Lily has been able to surround herself with. He's certainly, I know he's saying to her that he's bored, and he probably is a little bit bored of what's going on and a little bit bored of supporting these women that are going out and doing things in the city. But I think he sees the tide turning. Like he says it, and that's the name of the episode, is Ebb Tide. His line to her is, we're at the ebb tide. One of us needs to change their ways, and it will be you, not me. Because I think he's scared. He's in that house with all of the women who are there eating and feasting and partying effectively in the house all together, feeling powerful. And when he goes to approach Lily for, some kind of comfort or some kind of, some of their relationship that they've had before, she turns him away because she wants to care for another one of the women that needs her help. And he feels completely left out of it and is confronted by Justine in one of my favorite moments of season 3. That moment when you have Justine feeling epically confident in the face of Dorian, and Dorian saying to Justine, you think you know sin. You're just learning the language. I wrote the book on it. And she responding to him with, there's a day your charm won't be enough. You wanted to kill her and you got her, they're having this battle of wills between the two of them. And it ends with that wonderful line from Dorian with the, you want to play with me, kitten, then show me your claws. Where that it's going to come down to a battle between Dorian and Justine. And if Lily's around, likely Justine will be protected from Dorian.
Yes.
So while it's not something that he's saying outright in the storyline, and not something that he's actually saying when asked by Lily, he's saying, I'm bored, I wanted you to be better than this. He actually feels like he's just a scared child being overrun by these powerful women who he's allowed to enter his home. And the only way he can fix that is by kicking out Lily and kicking out all of them.
I think he's both. And I only say that having watched episode 9 as well. I actually think he's both. I think you see the boredom when you have Lily recounting the Keen tradition from Ireland with, and the story of the women being sort of persecuted by the church, but going to their deaths still keening, and using their tradition so that it lives on, and it is immortal. And that to him is boredom. And I think we get the sense that, he's lived through potential revolutions in the past, and he just sees another one here, and maybe he feels it's just not going to be successful. So there's a boredom there in terms of this, I suppose, endless cycle that Dorian feels maybe he's going through.
I think we've talked many times about the idea that people justify themselves as the hero of their own story. What he's listening to is hearing the story of these women rising up together, saying that they will sing as they are put to death for the things they're going to do. And the instructions that are coming from Lily to the gang of women are effectively describing Dorian. They're saying, go out and find a bad man.
Absolutely.
Go out and find somebody that's cheating on their wife. Go out and find somebody that's whoring around the city, that is treating women badly, and bring me his right hand. She's sending them all out. And you can see it in Dorian's face. He's going, how quickly is it going to turn to bring me Dorian's head?
Exactly. And but that's what I mean. I was going to say, but he is also threatened personally with Justine. He sees someone who, is this acolyte of Lily. And it's that moment where Lily decides maybe that he is dispensable. And so, yes, it's also about self-preservation for himself.
Yeah.
Whether they could kill him, I don't know. I suspect unless they know about the painting, then he would probably be able to soak up a lot of damage from the combined attack by all these women. But yes, I think, yes, seeing Dorian's dining table centerpiece take a very dark turn, the bowl of fruit replaced by the mound of right hands from the men. Yes, he is threatened and frightened as well.
Absolutely. Actually, we never really spoke about the power that he has. Remember, he did have his ear grow back. He does look pristine now. So yes, if he had his right arm taken or his right hand taken, most likely that would grow back, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of it for that discussion, because we will be talking more about Dorian and Lily and the story of Victor as well as we go on through the rest of the episodes. Any other notes from this episode you want to talk about?
It's just the conversation between Katrina Hartigan and Vanessa, where Katrina is discussing that Dracula with Vanessa, and Vanessa has been reading all the tales and so on, and Katrina just goes, these were done by small-minded peasants and poets and theologians. They made stuff up to fit their own fears. You might as well read the Bible for its history like an idiot child. But despite that, she does say that some of the superstition correlates, or, it is repeated, and it is the one where he dwells in the house of night creature is the moment that the penny drops for Vanessa, realizing that Dr. Sweet, is this master who has been stalking her and makes her go, to the Natural History Museum.
Yeah.
You get that great line then as Vanessa gives her neck to, Dr. Sweet. Dare I say it, Vanessa gets a nosh. And do you accept me? He says, and she goes, I accept myself.
Yeah.
And so it is almost about herself, her sort of submission to Dracula at this point, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I know we've talked a couple of times about, my love of the idea of vampires and how they're treated in different mediums and that kind of stuff. And it has always struck me. I think we've talked about this before, and I can't remember whether it was something we talked about on the podcast, maybe in season 1 when they had the vampires. And it is that concept that always kind of rubbed me the wrong way with some tellings of the vampire tales where, they can't cross across the threshold without being invited into a house, or they can't be seen in mirrors, or a cross on them burns them, or they can't be seen in daylight, that kind of stuff, where you're kind of going, yeah, but would that make sense if you were to have it in the real world? All of those failings, would that not mean that they could be easily trapped and easily killed? The more of them that are layered on top of each other, it always felt like, you've got 7 things here that a vampire can't do. Well, how does he pass for human and get his victims then? Because I love that about Katrina, where she's going, yeah, but these are made up by people who were hoping that these are the things that could stop the vampire, but no real truth in there.
Yeah, exactly. It was great. She dispels garlic, she dispels the cross, she dispels the reflection, the day walking, and all this kind of thing. And in that sense, it's really, really good. Yeah,
and it was season 1 where we talk about this, because it was because the master in the first season came in through her window without being invited into the place. So that's where we had the discussion. One touch I also liked in the episode that I thought was really interesting was before Vanessa goes to meet Dr. Sweet, she touches the wall where the cross used to be before leaving the house. Yeah. She just thought it was a nice little touch back and a reference. If you've seen every episode and remember every moment of every episode, you'd notice it, but you may not, because it's not like there's a mark of the cross on the wall or anything like that. She just touches the wall where the cross used to be, which I just thought was a nice touch for her.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I think that's the discussion about Ebb Tide.
Nice little episode.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah, really interesting.
Now let us ebb our way into episode 8.
Absolutely. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back in a moment to discuss episode 8 of season 3 of Penny Dreadful, Perpetual Night.
Hi, I'm one of the High Priests of Khonshu Ray, and I have the sacred privilege of providing you, the loony listener, with a podcast honouring Marvel's very own Moon Knight. So join me and a host of others at Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram or support the show by becoming a Patreon member. Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. It's time to get your conchu on.
Welcome back, Penny Faithful, for the penultimate time for the second last episode of Penny Dreadful Season 3. We're talking about Episode 8, Perpetual Night. I'm still one of your hosts, Derek.
Yes, and I am still in human form as one of your other hosts, John. Welcome, fellow Darklings and Nightcomers. Indeed, yes, this is Perpetual Night, and dare I say it, London really has gone to shit.
It really has.
I wasn't expecting that they would literally turn it into sort of hell on earth. There was part of me wondering whether it was just, that kind of pea super. It was just that industrial landscape. That's what they were trying to reference. But I think here it really is about the end of days has been talked about.
Yeah.
And I thought that was quite a bold and good choice to go down that route rather than to simply have it fobbed off as sort of the industrial pea super with the fog and the smoke and all of that, making it the streets as bad as it was, even though that did happen. So it's a nice reference to that as well. But this is really indicating that yes, it is coming to pass, the prophecy, effectively, which I thought was really good.
Exactly. Yes, something to reference as well as we get into these final two episodes, this penultimate episode and the last one. These were originally aired as one 2-hour block when they aired on Sky Atlantic at the time and on Showtime when they were aired originally. We're going to talk about them as two separate episodes, episode 8 followed by episode 9, because that's the way we've been doing the entire series. And also on the DVD, they are cut and separated. And I thought it was kind of sad. And episode 9 started with a song instead of the theme tune, because originally they were put together as one episode, so you wouldn't have had a theme tune in between the two. But I was kind of expecting the theme tune to come in at the start of episode 9, and when it didn't, I was really surprised. I was kind of like, oh, so the last time we heard that beautiful theme tune that we've been listening to for all 24 of 26 of these episodes since the beginning was in episode 8, not in episode 9. I was just really surprised by it.
Yeah, it was a bit of a shock, but it was a great little tune to open it up for episode 9 for sure. But the theme tune itself is great, but it was interesting to have that variation. But of course you wouldn't have gotten that when it was aired originally.
Exactly. A lot of story in the last 2 hours as well. A lot of things wrapped up over the course of these 2 hours, and I'm not sure the way we watched it was we watched one episode one night and one episode the next night. So I'm not sure watching it, because I think at the time when we watched it on television, we did watch both episodes back to back, but so much is crammed into the last episodes to close off this season. I think it works better as having it on two separate nights just to take it all in.
I do, but I also think it's slightly asymmetrical in terms of the two. I certainly didn't take as many notes for episode 8.
Right.
And I think maybe because if it was running into episode 9, ultimately, as one big 2-hour episode, it's a different thing. So in that sense, if you take it as a whole, it does build up. But I noticed I really was quite sparse on my notes, really, for episode 8. And I think mainly it's because you've got everyone coming back together again. So it's a little, with Sir Malcolm and Ethan coming back to London, this time with Kaetenay, that it's re-establishing them back into London a bit and catching up with the events that have unfolded in their absence.
I'm so glad this has worked out this way, because I remember saying it back in episode 6 as we were recording it, the parts that we've been recording, I was wondering whether they'd just, hop on a boat and get back to London to help out Vanessa towards the end. And of course they would. That makes sense in your final season. You can't have your characters separated for the whole season. But it did take one extra episode and they're back. And it does show the passage of time in this episode. So let's get into our discussions about it so we can go into our big moments about the episode. Episode, once again, directed by Damon Thomas, who returns after the previous episodes he'd done. I think he's done 5 episodes of Penny Dreadful overall. And this time the episode was written by Krysty Wilson-Cairns, the other staff writer that came on board for season 3. John, do you want to give us the summary for this episode?
Sure. Sir Malcolm, Ethan and Kaetenay arrive in London to find the streets deserted and falling under the influence of darkness. Kaetenay helps save them when they are attacked by vampires at Sir Malcolm's home. She tells them that the end of days is coming and that Vanessa is the only one who can stop it. Dorian dismisses Lily's army and then kills Justine. Lily reveals a secret from her past to Victor, who releases her without administering the serum. Dr. Seward discovers Renfield is working for Dracula, and Ethan is attacked by vampires in the deserted streets of London as Kaetenay reveals his true self.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Wolfenay, I think I was calling him by the end of the episode.
I think so. Or, dare I say it, the Silver Fox.
Absolutely, absolutely. John, what is your big moment from the penultimate episode of Penny Dreadful?
I think it is the boys are back in town in that sense, and London, as I've said before, going to shit, really. I really like the atmosphere that's created with this pea souper that is shrouding the city. The streets are deserted. There's plagues of rats as Sir Malcolm, Ethan and Kaetenay arrive back in London and get off the ship. They're told to get back on the ship and go back to wherever they came from because London has just fallen. And you have the frogs coming up from the sewers through the pipework.
Yeah.
I really like that where as Dr. Seward sees that Renfield is listening in on her confidential drums and the recordings of her consultations with Vanessa, and she realizes that he is working for Dracula. You see him with a frog on the desk, and he's really descended into sort of the black veins around his eyes, the red eye, the paler complexion. She said in the last episode, "Are you unwell?" And I'm really enjoying Renfield and Dr. Seward, I have to say. But here, she confronts him, but he does, obviously like frog's legs, as he devours this frog, but ultimately,
frog's bellies.
Exactly. But as Dr. Seward kind of knocks him out with the ashtray, who says smoking's bad for you. It saved her life anyway. Then you see all the frogs coming up through the sink into her office. Yeah. So you really get the sense of these almost these biblical plagues. You expect locusts to kind of swarm in at some point. We've had the rats and the frogs. These night creatures.
I do love, just after he bites into the frog, he kind of says, Renfield says, I guess we should take this as my resignation to her as well. And I love, again, as she does beat him to the ground and get out of the room, he's saying to her, I know you don't have the heart to beat me. I know you can't beat me kind of thing. And he should have listened to more of the tapes because she is a murderer, right?
Yes, exactly.
So I do like that kind of interplay between the two. Now, I said this to John while I was watching the episode, that I don't know why, but in my head, when the prophecy that was out there of when Vanessa joins up with Dracula, the night creatures would take over London. I don't know why, but I was thinking much more supernatural creatures than, actual bats and rats and frogs will take over, the animals that live during the nighttime. Are there more owls in the city of London now? Is that the kind of thing that's going on? And that's exactly what it is. It's all of the creatures that come out at night now take over London because London is like night all the time. I think I was just more expecting, roaming vampires and zombies and mummies and werewolves and that kind of stuff. All those supernatural creatures would now take over the city, but they actually meant creatures that live at night.
Yeah, and I suppose from the episode A Blade of Grass, it is that Dracula is the master of these creatures. Yeah. I suppose it has a more biblical tone to it with that. But who knows, though? Maybe in Egypt it is mummies that come out mainly. Maybe it's werewolves and coyotes and so on in North America. Maybe, yeah. So, who knows? But certainly I really like this. And, Sir Malcolm, Ethan and Kaetenay have come back to a very, very different city. And not only have they come back to a different city, but they've come back to a different Sir Malcolm residence where they're attacked. I mean, we have that fairly disturbing image of the dog on a butcher's hook hanging up in Vanessa's bedroom, and you have Dracula's familiars that have sort of moved on into Sir Malcolm's house, so that you have this huge fight here, and you have Catriona Hartigan coming to the rescue, but Sir Malcolm is bitten, and this is kind of the jump off point to get Victor back in. But ultimately, he is saved with a quick thinking from Dr. Hartigan with cauterization of the wound. But I like that she kind of fills Sir Malcolm in with what's been going on. Although I like the fact that he does say, "What are you doing in my house?" There is a strange woman who comes to the rescue to help them kill the familiars that are rampaging through the house, trying to kill them. But ultimately, Catriona Hartigan then does say this is the end of days. She informs how she's been helping Vanessa, has been put in touch here, and that she effectively becomes part of the company that comes back together here, which I really like. And
does she mention to them at all that it's Mr. Lyle that put them in contact?
No.
I felt that would have been a really easy line to say.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Ferdinand Lyle has left the country.
Yeah.
I've been put in contact with Vanessa because of my experience. At least there's a connection to the company.
Exactly.
There.
It would have been nice that, I think.
Yeah.
But no, she doesn't. But I think, here, as well, at the same time, Dr. Seward arrives, and you have Sir Malcolm meeting both Dr. Seward for the first time and getting to know Hartigan here. And them ultimately going to Bedlam Hospital in order to interrogate Renfield.
Yeah.
There is a great line as Dr. Seward returns, and the orderly there, she goes, "Have you restrained him?" And he goes, "Yes, he's been biting." Because Renfield, yes, he's certainly got the taste for blood. He's hoping to become who he thinks he might be, in this moment now that the end of days has arrived. But you have this great little, this fight, and you see the power of the familiars. And I think this leads, with, Ethan going out to try and find Dr. Frankenstein to come and help Sir Malcolm. I think ultimately that all kind of falls by the wayside a bit, and it doesn't really play out like that. Ethan doesn't find Victor. In fact, there's a chance meeting because Victor is already at Bedlam Hospital in episode 9. So it feels a bit like a mistake that they've kind of actually bumped in, a fairly fortuitous encounter, dare I say it. But in this deserted London, you have the familiars feasting. Ethan is brought away by a creepy kid, and he comes face to face with Dracula in Chinatown. And this is where Ethan puts forward his intentions that he is here for Vanessa. He will protect her. He will defend her against Dracula. Yep. Dracula doesn't finish him off now, and instead leaves that to his familiars. But luckily there is a full moon, and we do get a great little street fight with him, White sort of clawing his way through the familiars. But more importantly, we get the arrival of the Silver Fox in Kaetenay, his father, who is also a werewolf. And I really, really like that. I mean, it's been signposted pretty heavily. I think the interesting thing, and just to sneak into episode 9, is that this is new for Ethan. He didn't realize that Kaetenay was also a werewolf. He didn't realize that it was Kaetenay who had effectively given this curse to Ethan, to himself, which I found surprising, because I was under the impression that's kind of why he hated him so much. But actually, the hatred by Ethan of Kaetenay, that kind of fairly antagonistic relationship, comes from the fact of what Kaetenay has asked Ethan to do for the Apaches, that bloodlust that comes in him sort of taking the revenge on the US Army, on his family, and so on. It all comes from that. And so Ethan discovers that Kaetenay is his dog father, should I say, that he is kind of this beast father. And I do like this conversation. I'm bringing it in here from episode 9, but I think it's a really nice moment where, you know, Kaetenay describes how I thought it was this gift to save my people, the Apaches, but ultimately, it needed someone who was pure of heart, who would save all people. And that was why Kaetenay picked Ethan.
Yeah.
He has this great line of, I claimed you for God, when he realized what this curse actually meant, what this power meant. I thought that was really nice. But the two of them, you know, go all out working together to kill the familiars in Chinatown as they're attacked. So I really like this atmosphere in London, that it felt dangerous. It felt like it had gone to pot. It felt menacing and creepy. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I mentioned earlier on in the season that I was hoping that we would get the story of how Ethan became the wolf. You know, we had heard his history. We'd had the background of what happened between himself and his family. And I was hoping they were going to get time really to tell the story of what happened with Ethan. I think it was signposted that of course his connection with the Apache is what turned him into a werewolf. But I was quite surprised in a way that Kaetenay was also a werewolf and he's the one that turned Ethan. I don't know why I felt like it would be more that Kaetenay turned him into the weapon. I didn't think there was going to be a family of wolves in that way, but it was definitely signposted. It was there. It's not a massive shock, but I do think it was good that they had it in here like that, though.
But it also was quite cute because Kaetenay looked like he had little grey ears from the mane of hair that grows when he becomes a werewolf. So it was like had little kind of doggy ears. But no, I really like this. I think of all the characters introduced in season 3, I think Kaetenay has been the one that has really been fleshed out, like in a good amount, and really feels integral to the storyline. I feel that with, you know, I love Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, that storyline. I'm so excited with Dr. Jekyll coming into this show, but I just feel we've not really talked about him except with Victor, and I think he's not had the same treatment that I feel he should have gotten by coming into this show. And I think for me, it's just simply that I think he should have been introduced in season 1 or season 2 much earlier on, so that, you know, it could have been explored more fully. But obviously, you know, he's been brought in for a particular reason in this season. But it's a shame because I really like the character of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from the literature. And I've always felt that in films, it's just either been really badly portrayed or has been given short shrift. And I think in this instance, I'm regretful that he has been given short shrift because I loved the character, what we have seen. Yeah. And I think Shazaz Latif has been brilliant, and I would love to have seen him become Mr. Hyde and just really see that dual personality. Yeah. But I think it's great that Kaetenay has had this treatment, though, ultimately.
Definitely. I was going to actually save some of the discussion about things that we may not have felt were the greatest thing about season 3. Maybe some of the characters that were missed out. I was going to say that towards the end of episode 9 discussion as we close out the series, if that's okay. Let's
definitely.
A little bit of that, but I'm totally with you. I feel sad there's some characters that have been in the season that we haven't talked about outside of the summary because they've been reasonably perfunctory. They've kind of pushed the narrative forward and could have been used much stronger. So let's talk about that as we get to the end of the episode, of episode 9. This Pea Super in London is kind of a reference as well in itself, isn't it? There's the whole concept of what happened with Jack the Ripper and his murders in London that took place around a time where there was massive fog that was in London that held up apparently the investigation that was going on, and that allowed Jack the Ripper to escape for a bit longer. Apparently there was some leads that they couldn't follow up because people couldn't leave their houses during this massive fog. It seems so different to what we see now. You know, a fog comes down and everybody just kind of gets in their cars and goes out. But at times during this really industrial period in London, I think up until the 50s, when a fog descended, it can merge with the kind of output of industry, output of factories, and creates kind of this acid fog, almost like acid rain that we would have had in the 80s, or we know of from the 80s. But this acid fog killed thousands of people in London.
And every house, it was run on coal. Every house had a coal fire or a coal stove. Coal was king. Coal drove the Industrial Revolution through steam power, and with electricity, generation of electricity. And so, coal was king. So not only the industry pumping out whatever it was pumping out, because of course, no kind of environmental protection in that sense. But all the houses, the bit of the fuel used for cooking, for heating was primarily coal. So, the nascent electricity that was coming in, it was generated by coal. It was all coal powered. So, all this combined, to sort of make the fogs worse, but also, in the reactions in the atmosphere for them to be seriously dangerous. And in the 50s, there were something like 12,000 deaths from a big pea super industry, much still very prominent in London, and that led to the Clean Airs Act in the UK, at least. So it had implications, and that's the thing. I think this is the really interesting. It plays on that here, but ultimately it is the end of days that is happening. This is almost the use of this fog and the industry by the forces of darkness. And I thought was really good.
Absolutely. I love that kind of tying in that, everybody else in London is thinking, oh, it's just the factories and the fog. And we know, watching this show, that actually it was because of the supernatural element that was going on that brought down, this. I think that's quite a nice touch to kind of tie it into something that does realistically happen. But it is a surprise thinking about it this far away from it and not researching it up until, watching these episodes, I suppose, that this kind of stuff did happen on occasion and was an event that could have been protected if industry didn't output so much toxic waste effectively into the atmosphere at the time. So very thankful that kind of stuff doesn't happen these days.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to Justine and Lily and Dorian for my big moment from this episode. We talked about it a little bit more in our episode 7 discussion, but I thought the connection between those two major characters. Lily had mentioned before that Justine not only reminds her of herself, she basically is exactly the same as what Lily was like when she was Brona and walking the streets. The two of them are very similar. So what I thought was really good connection in here from the writer was that both of them make similar statements as they're threatened with their lives. Effectively, you have Justine saying she'd rather die on her feet than live on her knees, as Dorian kind of dissipates Lily's tribe of women. You have the attack. He is stabbed by Justine directly in the heart, and he just pulls the knife out, drops to the floor as all of the women go running. Who've been told to leave.
They leave pretty quick, smartish, don't they, when they realise he effectively is not a regular man. I did like that moment, but I liked the effective bravery of Justine to stay, and as you say, have this similar view of the world as Lily. In that sense, she is this true acolyte of Lily's, that she would prefer to face him and stay here than go back to the life she had previously.
Well, she just says she can't. He's telling her, I don't care where you go, just go back to your silly little life and die as soon as you're going to die, basically. Just get out of here. And she just says she can't go back to her life on her knees. And he snaps her neck. Is his instant response. There's no moment of him going, well, live here with me and live out the rest of your life. That's it. They've had their battle. She's tried to kill him. And he says, well, if you'd rather die on your feet, well, I could do that for you. And snaps her neck. And the flip side of that, we have Lily appealing to Victor. It has always been a really creepy concept that we've had Victor bringing Brona back to life as Lily and then wanting her for himself. And because she developed into the person that she is, she left him and went off to seek something else. And now what he wants to do is effectively Eliza Doolittle her with drugs, turn her into a proper lady so that she will live with him for the rest of her life. And she's constantly saying to him that, you know, you can't force me to be the person that you want me to be, because that's not me.
Yeah.
But this discussion that we have between the two of them, where she's appealing to Victor because he loves her, or he loves a version of her, she's appealing to him to not let that go. I love some of the lines from Billie Piper in this.
Yeah,
she's
really
got
good.
some great moments where she's saying to him, you know, do you want me to beg for the barest scraps of dignity, when she has to ask for a glass of water, you know, that kind of stuff. But she says the line to him, she'd rather die who she is than live as his demure wife.
Yeah. And she explains about her daughter Sarah as well. You know, that, you know, she is quite clear to Victor, that even your creature, John Clare, is more human than he has been to her. And, you know, for her, the comment she makes is that it's worse than death, because she's going to be unmade. It's, as I was saying from the previous episode, for Lily, she doesn't scrub her past away. She realized that journey, for all good and bad bits of it, is the journey that's made her who she is, this resilient, strong woman who wants to change things, however much in a bloodthirsty way. But the cruelty of the world has reflected back on her. And while she now has dignity and strength, there is a cruelty behind that. But actually what we find here is, behind that, there is something more, because of the loss of her daughter, and the indignity that women have borne the brunt of in this male dominated society, and the stuff that they have to do, which is, you know, just not acceptable. And behind that, there is a caring, sort of matriarchal element to it as well.
But I
really like that.
Absolutely. I just love the strength of the character that comes out as she tells the story, you know, where she talks about, in order to feed her child, that's why she had to go to the streets. So she left her child alone while she did that, thinking, it's only a quick job. I'll close my eyes and it'll be over soon. And then she got beaten to the ground by this John, and then he didn't pay her. And she lay on the ground, sore and in pain. And you hear her saying, you know, all I wanted to do was just get up. Why the hell didn't I get up? If I got up, my daughter would have lived. And you can tell that she has learned from those experiences in her life who she has become. Those are the things that have taught her who she become. And rather than other people in this story even, who want the past to be wiped away so that they can live their life, she knows that she can't overwrite the past. She can't just forget about it, because it would change her as a human. And I think that's really interesting. You know, one of the central themes of the whole series of Penny Dreadful is privilege and advantage versus working class people. You know, the things that people have to do and work hard for and attain versus the things that are given to them. You know, everything from other characters who live out their life treating people like crap because they have the money and the privilege to do it. And Brona was one of those people that lived that life and has now fought her way out of it to get to this point. Even, okay, there's a bit of supernatural stuff and being brought back from the dead.
Yeah, exactly.
But she's fought her way out of that, and she never wants to go back to that. Because it takes away all of that experience, all of that work, all of that effort that she put in to get out of that situation. So it does really speak to that story. And I like that the response from Victor is to release her, to say that it is easy for us to become monsters. It is easy for us to turn into monsters. And he releases her from that. And another little touch that kind of connects those two situations between Dorian snapping Justine's neck. As Lily goes, she does reach for Victor's neck. She reaches for his throat, touches it, and then walks out. But I like, you know, that it depends on who you're appealing for leniency to. You know, if it's someone that loves you, like Victor loves Lily, his response is, I will let you live then. Whereas if you're appealing to Dorian, you know, I'd rather die than do that. Dorian will go, okay, well, I'll let you die. You know, that's the difference between the two. You know, Victor is a person with a heart who's been trying to live with the person he loves, who doesn't love him back. Whereas Dorian is trying to get back to his old life, and Justine is standing in his way almost, you know, she's challenged him.
And it's, you know, the privilege, because they believe they are superior to others. It's class war. It's almost the precursor to racism. Is this, you were judged based on your position in life.
Yeah.
And with that privilege meant you had no empathy with these people. And so you treated them like animals or dirt. And it's just another list in isms, effectively, that are negative and biased. And that's, I think, one of the big things that comes out of here, as well. I think not only that strength, but you really feel the power and the threat of Lily. Now, she tempers it, as you say, with Victor. And that's because, in a sense, she can empathize with Victor. She she's experienced the same as he has, and he has had the empathy enough to understand her point of view. And she is, that's the thing, underneath this kind of cruelty that maybe she has shown, she does have this other empathetic side. You know, you really do get that sense of a threat from her. I mean, I was all the way through that scene was, why have you just strapped her ankle? I was wondering how Victor was going to actually inject the serum anyway, because her arms were free, and with the glass of water, that was a ruse to try and, you know, again, get free and grab hold of Victor. So, really, I really got that sense, of her strength, but also linked with that strength to effectively snap Victor's neck at any moment. So I felt that menace, and it was played so well by Harry Treadaway, where he, you know, you could see him skirting the circumference of where the chain allowed Lily to get to. Yeah. But
you're right. I don't know how it would have played out, because he couldn't have gotten close to her. You know, they'd strapped the Scottish, guy that they tested the serum on. He's strapped by his head, by his hands, by his legs. And we already know that Lily has been given a form of super strength by being brought back from the dead. We already know she's very strong, so she could have easily broken the bond. So I suppose an interesting idea that you have Lily talking her way out of it when she could have actually killed Victor. You know, I think that's a nice indication of the type of character that she is.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing I thought that actually may have happened was with Ethan being charged to find Victor, that ultimately he was brought to Bedlam by the creepy child instead of to Chinatown, and that he would come face to face with Brennan. I'm glad they didn't do that, because it would have been a complication to the story way too late. It would have needed to have been done earlier.
And also it would have been Brona being saved by a man, or Lily being saved by a man. I like that she saved herself by using all the knowledge that she had of Victor to get her released.
Yeah, absolutely. But I was certainly I was anticipating some awkward moment of him bursting in with Victor and seeing Brona alive in the chair, and it leading to some kind of fallout between the two of them. So I'm glad they didn't do that, because it really wouldn't have been the right time to do it.
Not there, definitely. It is odd, and we will definitely talk about that one as well at the end. It is odd that 2 seasons have gone by, 2 members of the same company, both knew Brona, and one of the members, Ethan, hasn't met Brona for 2 seasons. I do think that is very odd. That's a small circle, and we thought it would have happened at this stage. That was my note for this episode. Anything else you wanted to talk about in this episode, John? Anything else we hadn't covered off?
No notes for this one. That's really difficult to say. No notes. No notes. No notes. No notes.
Oh wow, a Too Unlimited reference.
Exactly,
John. That might get us sued as well, because you're not Chris, so you actually had the tune there. Only one thing I had that I wanted to say for the episode. You mentioned it earlier on that you called it a dog hung on a hook over Vanessa's bed.
Yeah.
When I saw that instantly, I was thinking it was a wolf to taunt Ethan. That's why it was hung up over the bed. It looked like a wolf.
I think it is to taunt him, definitely.
Yeah, but the reason why it looked like a wolf, because we know from season 1 there are wolves in London. We'd seen them when they went to visit the zoo in season 1. So I thought it was a wolf that was strung up over the bed, bleeding out over her bed to show I have her now kind of thing from Dracula, real taunt to Ethan.
Yeah, and maybe it certainly wasn't a chinchilla anyway, and a poodle.
It was a rather big dog.
It was a big dog.
The message came across.
If not a wolf. Yeah, exactly.
And finally, one other thing, considering we're going through COVID-19 times at the moment, it just struck me that moment from Ethan, where 7,000 people have died in the fog, and Katrina says to Ethan, if you're going to go out, you need to wear a mask. And Ethan says, I'll take my chances. Yeah, he wouldn't survive very, very well in these times.
No, not at all.
No, I'll be grand. Don't worry about me. I'm not going to listen to any of the messages from the government to tell me what I need to do going out into this. I'll be fine.
I must say, it was the weird thing about this with the plague, the pestilence, and so on. And yeah, you kind of got this deserted London with a city in lockdown, in that sense. And you're just thinking, this is just weird. And then being told wear a mask and all of this, it felt strangely surreal for the current times that we're living in with the lockdown. Yeah.
I know one of our listeners, Steve Brown, wonderful friend of the show, pointed out that early in season 1, Ethan was also asked to social distance from Brona. So I thought that was quite interesting. So Ethan not taking any responsibility for his actions during a period of that he should be staying indoors and wearing masks.
Yeah, because she had consumption, didn't she? And yet, yes, they were certainly very intimate with one another. I'm not too sure to what extent consumption is infectious or not, or whether it's just a plague on the lungs from the environment. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think there's something that could have happened if he was staying very close. So basically, follow the rules that everybody says, stay indoors if you can and wear your masks and wear your gloves and all that kind of stuff, unless you're a supernatural being who has werewolf powers.
Well, exactly.
Because then taking your chances isn't as difficult as it would be for everybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. That's our discussion for episode 8, the penultimate episode of season 3 of Penny Dreadful. Actually, the penultimate episode of Penny Dreadful.
Yes, the penultimate perpetual episode.
We'll take another break and we'll be back after this to talk about the final episode of Penny Dreadful, The Blessed Dark.
Ooh.
I am Connor from the House of L.
And I am Ray from the House of Zod.
We are two of the many, many survivors of Krypton's destruction, and we have made our home in Australia, and dare I say, have become Australians, for better or worse. But we have also decided to read Superman comics, read Superman books, watch Superman shows, cartoons, movies, basically everything Superman, and from an Australian perspective as well. Whether you're a seasoned fan, like me,
or whether you are coming in fresh, wide-eyed and wanting to learn more like me, then this podcast is for you. Join us for our bi-weekly adventures available on all good podcast catchers.
But just search for Last Sons of Krypton, a Superman podcast. We'll be coming to you from Australia or some cosmic dimension, wherever we are that week.
Up, and away.
And we're back. The epic adventure of 27 episodes of Penny Dreadful over, 4 weeks?
Yes.
Yeah, we're talking about The Blessed Dark, the final episode of the original series of Penny Dreadful from John Logan. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Blessed be the darkness, fellow darklings. Yes, I'm one of your other hosts, John. I'm looking a little pasty, my eyes are going slightly bloodshot, and my veins are looking somewhat black as I move into this final episode.
Yeah. See, the way I threw our listeners off by not opening with Welcome Back, fellow Penny Faithful, for the first time. Like the show didn't come back with its theme tune. Speaking of theme tunes, a huge thank you for the theme tune for our episodes of Penny Dreadful to Typos, or Typos. I can't remember how you pronounce it, but
Typos.
Yeah, really good theme that we've used this season. I've really enjoyed listening to it every time I've been editing it.
It's really good.
It's really good. Hopefully we'll be using the same theme for Penny Dreadful City of Angels or Penny Dreadful Season 4, whichever way you want to call it. The original composer for Penny Dreadful is different. It's changed for City of Angels. Abel Korzeniowski did the original music for Penny Dreadful, and it's very evocative of that era.
Oh, it's really good.
But I understand with moving it to America and moving it to the 1930s, you would need a different composer. The composer for the new series is John Paisano, who did Daredevil, the theme for Daredevil, which is an amazing theme on another show that we covered for 3 seasons. So I'm very confident that he'll be able to do the music for the show and do it justice for City of Angels. But Abel Korzeniowski has been fantastic for this show.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he does. And I think certainly if it feels a bit more modern, I think we may need to change up our title music for City of Angels.
I'll be searching it over the next couple of weeks, I think.
Exactly.
See if we can find it before the first episode of that show airs. But as I said, we are at the end of our epic rewatch and retrospective for Penny Dreadful.
Yes, all in time for City of Angels on the 26th of April. Thank you, everyone who has supported this rewatch during these dark times as well, I suppose. Yes, anyone who has shared, rated us, left a review, and also for our Patreons as well. All support, any support, however you decide to do it for TV Podcast Industries, for the Dreadful podcast, is very much appreciated by myself and Derek. So a big thank you. So we hope you've been enjoying it for sure.
Absolutely. Good time to mention here. We will be releasing our episodes of Penny Dreadful City of Angels as they air in the US on Showtime. We'll be recording as soon after the episode premieres on the 26th of April. So make sure you stay subscribed to TV Podcast Industries or the Dreadful podcast to get our discussion about each individual episode. They will be slightly different from the way we're covering these, as it's a retrospective rewatch. We're kind of going back and taking out the big points that matter about each episode that feed into this final episode. So with a weekly show where we don't know what's coming in the future, we'll probably be talking much more in depth about things that may not matter as the episodes go on, just like we do with all of our other shows that we've covered on TV Podcast Industries. But we hope to hear from you and hear your thoughts weekly as the episodes go out. Email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com with any thoughts, any penny for your thoughts as you go on through each of the episodes each week. Let's get into our discussion about The Blessed Dark. Once again, the episode was directed by Paco Cabezas, who does direct the first 2 episodes of Penny Dreadful City of Angels, as I mentioned before. So really intrigued, given how much influence he's had over the last few episodes of the original Penny Dreadful, how he's going to take on board this new show and how he's going to guide it. They often mention that the original director for this show, J.A. Bayona, who directed the first 2 episodes of Penny Dreadful Season 1, kind of set the style and set the tone for the whole show. Yeah. And giving it over to Paco Cabezas, who ended Penny Dreadful, giving him the kick-off point for City of Angels, is interesting. So we may get a different style to kick off that show.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Again, it's going to be interesting. There's not many shows, I suppose, that effectively, you know, are as final in terms of these 3 seasons. You know, at the end of the credits for The Blessed Dark, we get the end.
That's right.
Obviously, classic literary thing there for novels, certainly in that time. But also it feels very final that we get that here. Exactly. And yet we have now a continuation. But I think it is a very different continuation. It is within the supernatural spirit of Penny Dreadful that we move into City of Angels. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And to mention, episode written by showrunner John Logan. He's written most of the episodes. I think there's only 3 episodes that he hadn't written himself in the entire run of Penny Dreadful. And same with City of Angels. This is his baby. He will guide it, and he'll deliver the storyline that he wants to deliver for City of Angels as well. So, very intrigued to see what he does after seeing these 3 seasons. Yeah, you're right. The placard at the end saying the end with no question mark. No, this leads on to another story. No, will we get a season 4? This was 3 seasons, which ended with a finality to them. But let's find out what happened in the final episode. John, do you want to give us the summary for The Blessed Dark?
Sure. Dracula reveals to Vanessa that Ethan is prophesized as his only threat. Meanwhile, Dr. Seward discovers from Renfield the location of Dracula's lair. Lily leaves Dorian, and the creature's son dies, and his wife urges him to take the boy to Victor so that he may be reanimated. Sir Malcolm and the others head to Dracula's lair to confront him and save Vanessa. They fend off an attack by the large group of Dracula's children, but then Dracula himself subdues them. Ethan, meanwhile, slips away and finds Vanessa. At her request, Ethan shoots her to end the darkness. Sir Malcolm, Victor, and Ethan consider their futures. The creature places his son's body into the River Thames, and Vanessa's funeral is held.
You're right. A certain finality to all of the storylines that we have here.
Definitely. Yeah. It really is, I think, it's a great choice. I think this show has had a lot of great choices, and the decisions it's made. And I think here, it is, do you save Vanessa or does she save herself through a sacrifice? And I think this is really, for me, the right choice made here. It feels, I suppose the main thing that I found slightly strange, because Vanessa has in some ways been out of this narrative a lot in this season because of looking at Ethan's story, I suppose, in a bit more detail. And I think that's why I feel Kaetenay has had a great introduction in this season, because it has been a lot about Ethan's story.
Certainly.
And whilst Vanessa's has continued, it's not continued in the same vein as the first two seasons. And I think here, I would have liked to maybe have seen a bit more of Vanessa. Given how important this moment is, but I think it is really nicely done. And actually, in the end, I think I don't have a problem with maybe her lack of screen time, as I thought it would. It's just something I kind of noted, for
towards these last three, particularly.
I mean, episode 8, she's not in it at all.
That's right. And episode 6, she's in every scene. So yeah, the balance towards the end of the season. I think I know what you mean. That there's that moment where Katrina's talking to her and saying, you need to treat this as a spy. It's not for a warrior to go in, and you wonder about the choice that she's made because there's nothing much on screen of what that choice is. And you see that she's made the choice in this episode. She has turned to darkness and she wants her friends saved, but doesn't want them with her. Early on in the episode, towards the end, that slightly changes, but you're not exactly sure of her motivation until you get to these final moments at the end of the episode.
Exactly. I think it would have been nice to have seen Vanessa kick some ass here and destroy Dracula in the same way that with the doll in season 2, she subdued Lucifer. Maybe just destroy Dracula is the wrong thing, more subdue him and really make him screw up, because I think, Dracula very much, when the jig is up, it's just like he goes. Yeah. And so again, I don't mind that, but I think maybe that was some problem for some viewers in this, and I think it would have been nice to have seen her, reenact the Verbus Diablo, and really subdue him and send him whispering off with his tail between his legs, so to speak.
No, that's Ethan, John.
Well, yeah, exactly. But for me, my big moment, it kind of relates around that as well as involving it, which is the battle at Hinderaker's. The company is back together again, albeit with additions of Dr. Seward and Katrina Hartigan to face not only Dracula but the hordes of the Master's children or his familiars. And I really I liked a number of different things. I loved the build up to this, and I have to say I loved the scene with Dr. Seward and Renfield at Bedlam, and her use of the cane. It's very interesting. This was the moment where I really felt Renfield being the new Fenton from season 1, with Sir Malcolm threatening the force of his cane, his fists, his physical violence towards Renfield. And I liked how Dr. Seward steps in, takes the cane from him, and just that lovely rhythmic tapping as she leads Renfield to show her not only where Dracula is, but whilst doing that, you actually get the tragedy of Renfield. There is a really nice moment as they're walking down the street where, Dr. Seward is asking, what has he done with Vanessa? And Renfield said, well, he loves her and she loves him. And you see his face fall, and he talks about, I've never loved anyone. And preceding that, he's talked about how he's taken all these, women of the night, I suppose, all the prostitutes from Chinatown, and done ungodly things with them and all this kind of stuff, that moralistic element. And even though he's now a creature of Dracula, in this hypnotic state, there's still the old Renfield, and that tragedy kind of permeates into this reveal of Dracula's lair at Hinderaker's. And in that moment, he turns to Dr. Seward and said, "Did you love me? Were you my friend?" And there's no answer from her. And it's, I find that really, it's both tragic and, just how it's done is so good. And I think Renfield's given some great lines here. He goes, tap, 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 again, to the beat of her tapping, Sir Malcolm's cane on the ground. He goes, tap, tap, tap of the tattoo needle on the flesh as the blood drops. Just sort of great little line.
Yeah.
And, the portrayal of Renfield here is phenomenal, but
it is. But did you feel sympathy for Renfield's story? Because I don't think I did. And I think it's something that we talked about back at the start of season 1. The actor who plays Renfield is really good, because even before he's turned, you have that creepiness about him. You know, he doesn't just take hookers in London. He proposes to give money to any woman he wants to, and then has sex with them at the back of the stall, kind of thing. There's some creepiness about him, and he kind of pleads with Dr. Seward, saying, you know, "Did you love me? Maybe if I'd had a friend like you, I wouldn't have turned out like this.
Yeah.
Maybe it's somebody else's fault that I am the way I am," kind of thing. And I felt that was still a bit whiny and still a bit, you know, trying to excuse his behavior and blame other people for it.
No, I didn't. That's not how it came across to me.
Right.
Anyway, right. I felt that was the glimpse. I think he was an outcast. He was an outsider, probably why he was chosen by Dracula. Yeah. He didn't fit in. Dracula isolate. You know, you think of Katrina Hartigan's talk of Dracula being a predator, isolating. This guy was already isolated. He felt he didn't have anyone.
Right.
You know, his turn for affection was to go and hire prostitutes and have his moment with them. That physical intimacy, which would have been just morally awful for other people in society. So he isolated himself in many different ways. And I think, maybe he held on to the job, at Dr. Seward's because he was that initial face for all her clients. And that was his social interaction. Whilst he wasn't close to Dr. Seward, she was accepting of him. Yeah. And I think you don't really get that until this moment where she has him in the hypnotic state. But in a sense, it's too late for him.
Yeah.
There is no other route, because the route he's taken is the one that's led him to this point.
Yeah.
And in that sense, he doesn't look back on it as a source of strength, say, in the same way that Lily does.
Yeah.
So,
and it also calls back to Dr. Seward as well, right back from the first episode where she met Vanessa, saying to her, "I'm not your wife, I'm not your mother, I'm not your lover, I'm a doctor who's going to cure you." And when asked the question from him, "Do you love me? Could I have a friend like you?" she completely ignores the question because she wants him to bring her to Dracula. She has a use for him. She's not here to placate him, not here to sort out the issues that he has. She's going to use him to get to Dracula.
Yeah, and I mean, you could even argue that Renfield ultimately was at the wrong place at the wrong time, being the secretary to Dr. Seward, who Vanessa has gone to.
Yeah.
So, but I just feel you really get the sense of that tragedy here, but it leads the newfound company to Hinderaker's meat market, where many animals have been slaughtered before. It's a house of blood, I believe Renfield calls it.
That's right.
Which is really a great base for Dracula.
Yeah.
I really like that. But
isn't it interesting? Like, we were watching the extras for this, and we've mentioned before the show's filmed in Dublin probably a couple of times as we talked through the 3 seasons. Isn't it interesting? I'd been to the Natural History Museum of Ireland on a school tour when I was about 10 years old, and I didn't recognize that that's the place where Dracula has been based this entire season is in the Natural History Museum of Ireland. It's something that I just put to the back of my mind. And when I saw it on the extras for the show, I suddenly went, oh, that was a place I've been to. That is exactly what it still looks like. And unfortunately, in lockdown, we can't just pop out and go and see it again, which is what I was expecting to do, was to go and see some of the locations where this is filmed, revisit them now, because they're all real locations, just slightly dressed for the Victorian era. I'd love to have gone to the Natural History Museum again. It gave me the impetus to go there and go and go explore Dr. Sweet's place, you know?
Well, that's his place of work.
His place of work, yeah.
Whereas Hinderaker's is not the Natural History.
No, it's not.
No, far from it. But here they come to face down the Master, save Vanessa. You have Kaetenay and Ethan coming up through a different way, and ultimately a great battle here between all of Dracula's familiars as he sends them to destroy this company. I really like Dr. Seward's sort of, I'm from New York. She's a proper New Yorker.
We're used to casual gunplay.
Yeah, we're used to casual gunplay. And you also have Katrina Hartigan, who has described herself as being the warrior, the soldier, to Vanessa. You know, all of them fairly useful with a firearm. And then you have the fish out of water in Victor, who has come along. And I have to say, I absolutely related to Victor's portrayal by Harry Treadaway and how probably I would behave in a battle that I've been brought into, where frantically trying to reload the gun with 6 bullets as there's all these crazy familiars coming towards me, ready to kill me. I really enjoyed the battle. You know, you had the swagger of Sir Malcolm with his new gun, his semi-automatic. He has his own needle, you know, the sword from his cane. Very proficient. Katrina also very proficient. In fact, the two of them working off one another. I
love her flip up the stairs as she's taking out the vampires.
Really good. Cool. Dr. Seward knows how to handle a gun. She's killed her abusive husband beforehand. She's also used to gunplay, as she says. And then you have Victor really just running around, killing people, but sort of petrified.
Well, you get the impression that with his 6-shooter, he shot all 6 bullets and killed 1 vampire, whereas everybody else has shot 6 bullets and killed 6. You know, he does, as you say, exactly the same as myself. You know, I watched him feeling, I would like to have the idea that I would have the moral kind of constitution, I suppose, to join a company to save a friend. But I know I would be exactly like him in this situation, exactly the same as yourself, Johnny. You know, you suddenly go, it's nice to say I'll be there and I'll help out and I'll fight alongside everybody else, but I don't have the skills to do it.
No, exactly.
So I'm in the wrong situation.
Yeah,
right
exactly.
Now, you know?
But, you know, with wave after wave of familiars coming against them, that they're helped out with Ethan and with Kaetenay, who join in the fight. And I love that moment with Kaetenay to Sir Malcolm, where he goes, it's been an honor to hunt with you. You would have made a mighty Apache. I really enjoyed these two characters, and that really was a great line.
The two fathers of Ethan, yes.
Yeah. But ultimately, again, more familiars, and this is where Dracula says that go now. Vanessa allows you to live. Go while I allow it. And it all seems very fine until he starts. Sir Malcolm asks the question of Dracula about his daughter Mina, and you realize that Mina was just this pawn on the chess table. Yeah. She meant nothing to him, although he does say that her blood tasted sweet, and it kicks the battle off because it's like, you know, it's been an honor knowing you to Victor, to Dr. Seward, Katrina, and so on. It's a great against the odds fight here.
Well, they all think they're going to die, don't they, as well? One thing we talked about in episode 8 about the dispelling of a lot of the mythology around vampires. I wanted to just check if you noticed this, John, in the battle underneath in the sewers as Ethan and Kaetenay are coming in. They're surrounded by bats that turn into vampires, aren't they? So that is part of the regular mythology of vampires, that they can turn in out of bats. Bats are night creatures, but you see some of the bats hanging from the roof of the sewers as they're coming up, and then you see some familiars dropping from the same roof.
Okay.
It doesn't show the transformation as such, but I took it that this is to mean that they do transform in and out of that form. But it's the first time we've ever seen it in the series, so.
Maybe. I actually didn't take it like that. I just thought that, again, part of the night creatures, they had disturbed a colony of bats that all flew out, and then the familiars came in. I didn't take it as that, but I think it absolutely could have been.
Or, again, it could be a reference to, you seeing the two in the same place, you connect the two in your mind, effectively.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
Maybe they come in under cover of the bats leaving kind of thing.
Yeah.
So maybe that was it.
I think as well with this fight, I think we should all be like Katrina Hartigan, actually, and bring a knife, to be honest, because Victor in himself throws the gun away and picks up an old butcher pole with a hook on it. And he seems to have a lot more success with that. And certainly there's no need to reload in the same frantic way as Victor was trying to do. So I kind of really like this, but they give Ethan the space and time to go to what he thinks will be to save Vanessa. And it's, he's effectively trying to save her. He wants her to live. He sees that is his call, as the wolf of God. And ultimately Vanessa says, this goes with my sacrifice to save everyone, and asks Ethan, to kill her so that she denies the forces of darkness their prize, that she stops their hunt of her. And it's a really, you see him put the gun, to her gut, to end it with a kiss and then, the fire of the gun. The atmosphere here, the set dressing with all the candles is really, beautiful, atmospheric, that she is melancholic. She's, she says she's accepted this. It's, it's not him you need to fight. She says to Ethan, it's me. I was the one that brought this darkness to the world. Yet you see that she still has light within her. She doesn't want her friends to die. And actually, she's torn between these two. And I think that's always been the case. She has embraced the Verbus Diablo, yet has had, a strong faith in God and in her Catholic upbringing. Even with putting the cross back in season 2 into the fire.
Right at the end, yeah.
But she has this duality about her.
And it comes back in the conversation between Ethan and Vanessa, where she says, that was the end of that version of Vanessa, was when I burnt the cross. Ethan's description of him standing on the edge of the abyss, about to look over the edge and see his end, and even then he was able to turn back to God, I thought was a fascinating way for Ethan to try and encourage her to come back off her own precipice. Really good touch. Just quickly in the episode, I liked that Dracula having the discussion with Ethan while they're having their battle, where he's telling Ethan, Vanessa isn't yours, she's mine. Kind of going against the offer that he'd made to Vanessa last episode, where he said, I will accept you for being you. I'm not going to possess you. I'm going to stand by your side. And now he's telling Ethan that he does possess her. So I think it was important to have Dracula say that while he tells her that she's made her choices, that his whole premise was to get her as his possession as well. So yes. I think it's important to kind of, for him to have called out that he is evil, and he isn't doing this just for her benefit. He's doing it for his benefit.
Yeah, it was the way of enticing her to come willingly, almost with a mesmerism, a silver tongue. Yeah. And I think that comes out as well, where he says, you can go, Vanessa wants you to live. But he does then qualify that with go while I allow it. Exactly. So he doesn't need to follow her. He's his bride, absolutely, and will be the mother of evil, but he is still dominating her. And I think that comes across in that line as well. It's very much, it's not the willing relationship that she felt that it was when she bared her neck to him in the Natural History Museum.
It was quite startling, though, seeing her early on in the episode coming out after having after that meeting of the two of them where she bared her neck, seeing her coming out with her black dress on and the eyes turning similar to Renfield, kind of the skin going even more ashen and the eyes being as dark as they were. I did love, again, a great choice by the director, as she walks out to stand beside Dr. Sweet or Dracula. You see all of the familiars dropping to the ground in a bow almost and backing up away further from her. I thought it was one of those really amazingly choreographed moments for so many extras to have the same movement, like locusts, I think we talked about before, or cockroaches or something like that. You know, the way
exactly.
they all backed up away from. I thought that was really interesting.
In fact, when they come down to meet Sir Malcolm and the rest of them, great them coming down the walls and then kind of bending in a really distorted way to get back on their feet, was really nicely put. Yeah, I think as well, that whole early moment with Vanessa and Dracula, you do get the sense that she's maybe the one in control there as well. And because, again, I like the touch, she's dressed in black, but she puts her hand on his shoulder, and he comes up to touch it and she's moved it away before then. It feels like she's in a very strong position. But she does say, when he's saying that the wolf of God is after me, that, you know, he's too strong, she says, let him come, we'll end this in blood as it was always meant to be. And I think that's certainly a foretelling of this battle and potentially her end. I suppose it's ambiguous enough as to whether she will kill Ethan. She has pitched her tent firmly in the Forces of Darkness camp, or whether it's her own death, or whether it's that the blood is of Dracula. I mean, like, you don't know which way it will go. And it's a nice line that she brings here, for sure. And I like the contrast then that when Ethan comes to her, it's all this candlelight and she's in the white robe. And I think that's to the conflict within her, I suppose. I think also the fact that I've always felt that she has been an agent of God, but it is one who can perform dark magic. And I think, again, my reasoning for that is with Kaetenay meeting her. He's never met her in real life. When he comes to her in the spiritual connection, he says, you are made for the day, Vanessa, not the night. It's like he understands her true purpose in the same way as Ethan's, and where he says, I claimed you for God. So it's like Kaetenay has that insight into the grander designs as well, from having been an Apache using the power for his own people. He realized it should have been used for all the people of the world.
Absolutely. That's obviously the big moment from the episode, the story and the end of the Scorpion, I suppose, the Scorpion story of Vanessa. She's been our main character, you know, I suppose maybe arguably, but she is the main character of the show for me from the beginning. So having her end here, it's a shocking end, but I do think there's an inevitability about it. I was laughing when I was going back looking for some images for Penny Dreadful. I was going through the Twitter account for the official Penny Dreadful, and for their live tweet of the final episode, effectively all of their tweets that they were putting out with images for all of the cast had the lines written on it, this was foretold, this was inevitable, and had various lines said by Vanessa from the beginning of the series. You know, things about the air will be pestilent to the humans, all of this kind of stuff. And the whole final two episodes were set up as being the inevitable conclusion. And it got me thinking, going, you know, John Logan has said that it was 3 seasons and that was it. And there is a moment here where there's a choice if you take a kind of a meta look at it, there's a choice at the end of this season to either have this show a running show, like maybe Supernatural for 15 seasons, for example, or have an end to it. And the choice is either Ethan, being the proper enemy of Dracula, kills Dracula, or sends away this version of Dracula, and then next season it's about Ethan protecting Vanessa from the next force of darkness that comes after her, or they end it here and they go, this is a 3-season show where Vanessa dies and that's the end of the story, and there's no battle anymore between Lucifer and Dracula for their bride because the bride is gone. And it almost felt like that meta moment where they went, this is how you end the show after 3 seasons. Because otherwise we can keep this going with a new force of darkness looking for Vanessa next season and the company protecting her from it, or her protecting herself from it. And that's how you continue the show on and on. I just thought it was interesting. That's the choice that's laid there right in front of these two characters, where Ethan goes, but I could protect you. You know, I could fight him off and we could stand together forever. And until he dies, the show could continue effectively, you know? So I thought it was a little bit, in my mind, it suddenly turned a little bit meta, where I went, so it could have run for another 3 seasons. There could have been more ideas. There's loads of other stuff there to explore. But if you want to end your show in 3 seasons, the only way, really, the inevitable way to end it is to say the person they've been battling over, who is Vanessa, is going to take herself out of the equation. And all of those prophecies that you've had written about your ascent to ruler of the world can't come true anymore. So a really interesting end of the show, but the inevitable end if you're going to end the show after 3 seasons.
And you have that great moment where Vanessa says at the start with Dracula, forget the prophecies, we will forge our own journey. You know, so again, it comes back to all of these things, like with Katrina Hartigan saying, you know, all the superstition that has been written about, none of it's true. This is the reality. Exactly. So, and I think, you know, that also, I suppose in a meta way, is about how they've decided to tell this story.
Exactly.
I was happy with this. I thought it was the bold decision. I think it's the only reason why I would have liked to just have seen more of Vanessa, because I think at the start of episode 9, you do get, you know, she's there in black. She feels very confident around Dracula. In fact, I feel like, you know, she is the one that's in charge. She is the mother of evil, and therefore has this power and status above Dracula. And so it would have just been nice to have seen moments where maybe she's been reached to again by Kaetenay, or even through Ethan, to the point where, because then we just see her in white and it's a very supplicant, kind of Vanessa. It's very different, I think, from the start. You know, the beginning, it's like, bring the battle on. We'll finish this in blood. Yeah. And then she stays away from it in this candlelit, area. The contrast is good, but how's she gotten there?
But she's hiding her plan, isn't she? That's the element of it that we don't get to hear because we don't have her on screen. She's hiding what her actual plan is. Her plan all along is to end it in blood and to have Ethan end it.
Ultimately, she took Katrina's words to heart and took on board her advice. She became the infiltrator.
Exactly. So a really interesting ending. You have taken the big moment of the show, effectively, because that is the end of season 3, is the death of Vanessa and what happens with her. But I will take the other side of it, because there is another storyline going on, I think, which is all centered around Victor and the Immortals, effectively, because there is, from the beginning of this show, really, there is that other story, really, that's been surrounding Victor and his monsters, I suppose. So, with John Clare, you have it already in the summaries. We're not going to go into too much, but what a sad ending, for this character. You know, he did get back to his family. You know, we do see his son pass away. We said it was, you know, it was pretty likely that was going to happen. He wasn't specifically doing anything that he was bringing anything to his son to save him. But what he did bring was hope to his wife, that even if his son died, he could be brought back by Frankenstein, which was absolutely the opposite message of what John Clare wanted to bring back to his wife. But it is heartbreaking to see her say to him, take my son's body, go out of here and come back with him alive, or never come back again. You know, after making that connection again between the two of them, after that discussion with Vanessa back in episode 7, where he decided to put his life on the line, or his beliefs on the line, that he was going to be spurned by his family, go back to them, be welcomed back in with open arms from his wife, and then to be shunned because he's not willing to put his son through the pain he's been through. He's not willing to turn his son into this monster that he knows he was. It's a really sad moment, knowing that he's now going to be going back out, effectively wandering as the monster that he is.
I love this on a number of different levels. I think one is the immediate thing, the heartbreak, that the person who actually accepted him back, he has to turn away from Marjorie because she gives him the ultimatum of go now and bring him back alive or turn from this house. She's trying to, he doesn't connect in with her viewpoint where she says, you see a monster in yourself, but I see my husband. Yeah. He has gone through it. He doesn't want his dead son, Jack, to also go through that, even though Marjorie would love this resurrection of her son by Victor Frankenstein. Bring him back so that I can love him. You absolutely understand that in that moment.
Absolutely.
And John Clare has to make the decision of, at the moment of acceptance, he knows that his son's immortality lies in his soul transcending and going to God, that his memories, his spirit remains. And I think that comes to the eulogy that he does for the narration of John Clare's eulogy for Vanessa as he's watching from afar. Yeah. It's that in death that you live on through your soul. It's this idea of pre-existence, that the soul was there before the body. And I like then on another level how that actually contrasts with the other immortal of Dorian, who sees his immortality in him being still there in physical form, and actually it's the death of his emotions and his soul that he wants to do. So I find that really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was the other part of my final point. The ends of the Immortals is Lily returning to Dorian, which in a way was a kind of a surprise, because I don't know what her intention is other than to show him that she's still alive. His plan didn't work. I don't think she's there to team back up with him again.
No.
But we do hear his description of the wicked secret of the Immortals, effectively. This idea that, whatever you love will die and only you will stand there alone, never age, never tire, alone. It's a really interesting idea, I suppose, from Dorian. It's this, the thing that he's lived through. We actually know now, I think after this episode was finished, I was reading some other stuff about the creation of the character Dorian, and I'd always questioned how old he was. I'd always wondered whether, like in the book, is he 20 or 30 years, alive longer than he should be? Well, actually, the creation of this character, they have said he's over 200 years old. He's gone around for centuries. He talks in this speech to Lily about seeing many revolutions over the years. So the character has lived for a long enough time that he has got this experience, and this is how he's developed this idea of surrounding himself with nothing other than things that entertain him, because if you fall in love with anything, it goes. He describes to Lily, if you have a child, you bear a child, it will grow into a crone and die while you still stand looking exactly the same, being exactly the same, until you're just an emotionless painting of oneself, effectively. So, it's a really interesting, and scary kind of perspective that Dorian has here, I've talked before about my love of Anne Rice's novels, about those type of immortal vampires, and that's her perspective that she comes with in these books, is having these unchanging beings living through centuries. It's a great way of telling historical stories in a fiction way, a horror story way. That's the way she has them going through centuries, and eventually they need someone else by their side. And what often happens with her characters is they choose the person to be by their side after spending a few months or a few years with them, and then they have to spend eternity with someone that they've only known for a very small fraction of that eternity, and how that changes their relationship. So Dorian's perspective is an interesting one that's borne out within Anne Rice's version of Immortals as well. It's something, how can you judge eternity at the beginning of it is kind of the concept. So he's trying to impart to Lily, you will change. You won't be as passionate about everything as you are right now. And when you lose that passion almost, come back and find me. I'll be waiting for you, and we can continue together, and I'll teach you in the ways of being a passionless immortal, because losing your passion and losing love isn't a massive price to pay for being eternal and being immortal. Like, it's such an interesting idea, and you can see that Lily will not accept that.
No, I think this is really good. I mean, Dorian, what an obnoxious character, but in that wicked secret that he, as you say, imparts to Lily, I think that idea absolutely gives the context of Dorian. You know, for him, immortality is maintained through the physical presence. Actually, the subversion of your own emotions and soul in you know, as it would be described, I think, in Penny Dreadful. Whereas for Lily at this moment, and also for John Clare, even though they're immortal, it's that they are trying to, because they have been created with no emotion, that's what they're looking to recapture. Yeah. And in doing that, all the emotion, for good or for worse, in both their cases, relatively negative, is what has forged them and led them to cherish when they do have something.
Absolutely.
Whereas Dorian has come from a part where he has transformed into a mortal from being alive through the painting, where it's kept him at that same age. I think Lily has that great moment where she says, one day you realize that you are like them, looking at the paintings, beautiful but dead. And he goes, a small price to pay for immortal perfection.
Yeah.
You know, so him, it is about physical perfection.
Oh, he's so self-absorbed.
With no emotion or spirit. For the other two, they want to recapture that spirit because they are actually born just physical shells reanimated by Victor.
Yeah.
And that's the difference where they're coming at it from. I find it was really, really well done.
Absolutely. He's so self-absorbed. John, can you remember how you described Dorian at the end of this episode? Because we talked about it after watching the episode yesterday. How did you describe Dorian to everybody? It was something like an immortal member of the Towie cast or the Jersey Shore cast.
Yes, it was. He is like someone from Towie or
The Only Way is Essex.
The Only Way is Essex, or, you know, just these beautiful people that just seem so sterile and vapid. And I'm sure they're not in real life, but just the way the show is done, you're just like, or Geordie Shores or Jersey Shores. You know, it's just like, they are Dorian, or they're portrayed as Dorian, like this. And it's
entertain me, and if you don't entertain me, I don't want to be anywhere around you, and I could just move on and find somebody else to entertain.
It's always me,
exactly.
And it's like it's, and I'm, you know, it's just the way it's done. It's just pure vapidness.
Yeah. It does sometimes feel, considering how long that show's been on air, it does feel like they are all Eternals, and they are the last people that should be granted eternity. John, that was my notes just about the ends of the Immortals, because I do think their stories do come to an end.
And a really good one. I really enjoyed it.
It is a really good one. Not a happy one for any of those characters either. And I thought, I don't know, I somehow felt there might have been a happier ending for one or other of them. Lily does walk out and we don't know where she's gone. John Clare takes his son's body, puts it into the Thames, and allows it to fall to be buried effectively at sea, like he would have been as a former sailor, which I thought was a nice little connection for him as a character. But we don't have any idea of where their future is going for either of those two characters. Dorian just says he will always be there. He will be in exactly the same place doing whatever he wants to for the rest of his life. That's it. That's his plan.
He will live out being an immortal douchebag.
Exactly.
Sure.
But no happy ending for any of them.
No.
Which I thought was an interesting touch. I know this show itself is not a happy show. It's not a show that's going to end off with a marriage or a wedding and kids kind of thing. We saw that in season 2 with the vision of the possible future for Vanessa and Ethan that was given to her, and knew that it couldn't end with a happy ending for any of the characters. But I thought it was an interesting way of closing out the show, and it fitted, I suppose, the show that we've watched.
Absolutely. And yet, I think certainly for the non-immortals, for Sir Malcolm, for Ethan and Kaetenay, and the others, there's an element of hope there. I mean, I think Ethan is really great in his own kind of solace and despair where he's in Vanessa's bedroom and they're grieving. And I like when he's joined by Sir Malcolm, and he says, will you stay, Ethan? And you're my family now, you know, him, Kaetenay and Sir Malcolm. It's really nice. And you have, Sir Malcolm talking about, she was the last link to who I was, Vanessa. I must now find out who I will be.
Yeah.
And
I think there was a point when we were all podcasting earlier on in the season, and I think it was when Sir Malcolm's wife got killed or killed herself, and I was asking the question, is there anybody still alive that Malcolm has been around? And your answer was Vanessa. Is the only person that was still alive at the time, and now he's taken on board Ethan as his son effectively. So there is one other person that is alive, but everybody else that he's been in contact with. So while we say the story of the show is about Vanessa, the Scorpion, and her storyline, it's actually about all the people that Sir Malcolm got killed. Kind of the
absolutely. But within that, there is a hopeful that they are celebrating and mourning the life of Vanessa. But from that ash, I suppose, you have this new family for Sir Malcolm and for Ethan, with him and Ethan and Kaetenay. I found that very kind of uplifting. I think the Immortals are the ones that they're having that curse of being immortal, and how you deal with being persistent.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, though, to step out of the individual characters, let's not forget Vanessa did save the world. So when she died, the fog lifted over London, the sun came back out, and everybody is now able to return to their old lives. So outside of our characters, there is a big positive ending, which is the world is safe and not killed.
Exactly.
So there is another positive.
And I think as well with John Clare, with him burying or putting out to the River Thames and to see his son, not going back to his wife, effectively sacrificing that happiness. That it's also the eulogy that he gives for Vanessa here, the narration from him. It's about that in death, if you believe in souls, then they still remain. There's been talk of people's souls within the memories of them from other people and all this. And so, I mean, it's interesting. The poem that he's reciting here, during, Vanessa's, burial is William Wordsworth's ode, intimations of immortality from recollections of early childhood. I suppose linking to both his son Jack, but also, the immortality and the exploration of immortality. So it's kind of in three different movements. The first is being death and loss of youth and innocence. Right. So effectively like his son, but at the same time followed by the loss of divine, as we age, I suppose ultimately becoming skeptical about all of this, the experience, the weariness of time, going, oh, it'll never change, or there's all these words that we've listened to, but it's a hard graft, it's a hard life. And finally, the hope that this memory of spirituality allows us to sympathize or stay connected with our fellow humans. Right. That return of conviction. It's that immortality through the soul, as opposed to Dorian's one, which is you just persist and are detached, and it's the only way to survive. So in a sense that there is still his son and Vanessa still live on
in the memory of others and through their soul. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's again a hopeful-ish ending, and I think a lot of fans of Gothic writings and Victorian writings, this would be a massively hopeful closer to the series as well, because there's always a darkness within this storyline, and to end it, as I say, with marriage and kids for the end of the third season would have felt disingenuous to the show. And I think they did a reasonably good job to close out the season. Well, a very good job to close out the season. Any notes for the episode that we haven't discussed? I think I've talked about everything that I think I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
I guess that just leaves, what did you think of Penny Dreadful season 3 as a whole? We started our discussions of season 3 with the elephant in the room, which was that this is the controversial season of Penny Dreadful. A lot of viewers who would have considered themselves fans of Penny Dreadful don't like the way the show ended, and don't like that the show did end at the end of season 3. So overall, what did you think of season 3 of Penny Dreadful?
For season 3, I certainly like it more than I remembered liking it. I actually think there were a lot of things in here that I really, really enjoyed. And I think ultimately I would give this a very strong 4.5 juicy end of days frogs legs out of 5. I loved Ethan's story being sort of so explored in this, and I think that really meant that Kaetenay as a new introduction really got a fair hearing or airing in the show. And I think that because of that, it kind of just the difference between how his character and how he was interlinked within this story so well, it contrasted with Katrina and with Dr. Jekyll. Katrina was introduced and she served her purpose in discussing things with Vanessa. I think it was also maybe because Mr. Lyle or the actor couldn't stay in season 3 for whatever reason, or the commitments maybe.
That is what it felt like.
Yeah. But if it had gone on for a season 4, I'd love to have seen Katrina still there. I thought the time that she had, it was good. And because it wasn't a character that you had a preconception of, that was fine. Any little bit of new information was good.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I wonder if with Katrina, because she was only introduced for the last few episodes of the show, if she had been someone from history, would that have actually added to the character a bit more? Because I do feel she was quite perfunctory. I think my notes about her is very much that she was a bit superfluous. She came in to give some pieces of information that Mr. Lyle could have delivered. And I think she was a very broad character. The only thing you know about her is that she's a kick-ass fighter and that she stood up in Victorian society to the control of men, which means that she does align very well with our major female characters in the show from Lily and Vanessa. She aligns very closely to those type of people and would absolutely be in their circles. So you wonder why she wasn't a season ago or 2 seasons ago.
I mean, ultimately, all the knowledge could have been given by Mr. Lyle, I think. I think what would have been great is if it was Mr. Lyle and Katrina, both of them. It would have been really, really good to see. Yeah. But for me, I still think the biggest letdown was Dr. Jekyll, because I actually loved how Dr. Jekyll was portrayed here. But as I said in the last episode, for me, I just wish he had been brought in. A character of that weight I feel is more superfluous than Katrina. Yes, if she had been from a literary inspiration, then yes, it would have added to her. But because she's not, what they did add to her added something. I suppose, yeah. Whereas with Dr. Jekyll, there's so much more there, and it's not being explored in a John Logan way. Yeah. And ultimately, for me, this was the biggest superfluous element. Yeah. It was, how do we get Lily? How do we drive Lily's story? It worked for me, absolutely. But because he was such a big character, I wish he had been brought in season 1 or even earlier on in season 2. And because he could have just matured and brewed, and you would have gotten that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde moment, even if it was just other types of murders that had happened under the hands of Mr. Hyde. Exactly. And it didn't fit with the Ethan's murders or, the Jack the Ripper thing or whatever. To me, this was the biggest issue for me. I think as well, it was a little bit more disjointed, certainly earlier on. I think up till about episode 5, because they were really introducing it, it was very separated out, and I kind of, in that moment, I was missing all of them being at Sir Malcolm's house, fighting and so on. But I also got to that, I didn't mind so much, but I just think it was really good season. I thought it ended well. I thought you have A Blade of Grass, which was a great episode in terms of the flashback, and I think the moments we had
with only 3 of the actors as well, like it's so good to have that.
And I think Ethan's story, and certainly back at his father's estate, it was just really, really well done. I think, and I think the choice that Vanessa sacrifices herself, that's how the wolf and the scorpion come together is really nice. And even with Dorian and Lily, I think that works well. Creepy Justine as well. Ultimately ends up being a little bit of a hero of mine, standing up to Dorian in the way she does. But how Dorian experiences and feels immortality should be burdened or carried compared to John Clare's and ultimately Lily's is very different. I think that worked really, really nicely.
Yeah.
So I would give this a good solid 4 juicy End of Darkness frog legs out of 5 for sure. I think any of this wrap up potentially can be problematic for series, but I thought it was done really well.
Yeah.
I wish maybe Dracula hadn't just gone. It felt like a balloon had just deflated and he just farted off somewhere.
I kind of like that. I kind of like okay, well, there's nothing left here for me. I'm gone.
Yeah, jog on.
It's like he's been around for thousands of years waiting for this moment that his beloved Amon-Ra will return in the personification of Vanessa. We don't know how many times that's happened. The reincarnation thing is not clear in the show, but this is Amon-Tet meeting Amon-Ra again, after these many, many centuries of him waiting for her to return. Well, if there's nothing there for him to wait for, she's won, effectively. Vanessa has won. That is the end of the prophecy. It's the end of the idea. So off he goes. Why stay around and kill these people? They don't matter anyway. So off he goes. I thought that was quite an interesting choice. Similar to yourself, I really did enjoy season 3 much more than I remembered. And I think just sticking to knowing that it was the final season for the show, knowing it was 9 episodes and knowing that they were going to tell an end of the story this time, as opposed to the way normally you watch a show, which is, well, I know they say that this is the final season, but if they get another one, they have some storylines to pick up and take on to the 4th season, because that's how I felt watching it first time. I wasn't too disappointed in the treatment of Dr. Jekyll the first time I watched it, because I kept thinking, oh, well, okay, he's not developed in these first couple of episodes. He's a friend of Victor. They're holding him for season 4, but well, they weren't holding it for season 4 because they ended the show knowing that it was going to end at the end of season 3. Everything wrapped up. So there were so many little things they could have done to fix the storyline. Like you kind of mentioned it, but why didn't we have moments where he was changing into Mr. Hyde, killing people, waking up in the morning and going, I need to cure this. And if I push Victor enough on his path to curing Lily of the anger, then I can cure myself of this side of myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Why wasn't there moments of that? They absolutely could have filmed just a few scenes of that, would have just sorted out the story if they only had one season that they wanted to use, bringing him in and having the big reveal at the end of the show is that, well, now he can change his name from Dr. Jekyll to Lord Hyde. Well, that's not what you know him for. You don't know that he can just change his name. You know that he changes from a respectable doctor to a beast that kills things, a beast of evil. That's what you know. So why didn't you use a bit of that in the season? It felt like that felt a bit more disappointing seeing this time. Dr. Seward as well, loved the character. I thought having Patti LuPone back in the show and having her on screen with Vanessa so really often was great. But a lot of the time she ended off being a sounding board or a mechanism for Vanessa's story rather than a character on her own. You felt like there was only little touches of what you got from that character, and it felt a little bit superfluous, as we mentioned before. But overall, the story came to a pretty natural end for all of the characters. I think everybody's story ended the way it should have ended. There's nobody I'm disappointed with.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So overall, it's more, as I said when we were talking at the beginning of this episode, overall, I felt the choice here is either, do you want to see these characters continue for 10 seasons, or do you want the show to end with a good ending for all of the characters that you've watched? And I think that's probably going to be how I'd rate the show. I'm really happy when a show ends with a good ending. Watchmen would be a really good example. A 10-episode show that ended with a really good ending. I don't want to see a season 2 of that show because season 1 was so good. Yeah. Penny Dreadful is the same. These characters, I feel, have come to a really good end. And Penny Dreadful City of Angels is not connected to it. Although, watching it this time, I was wondering, will we have Dorian Gray sitting in an apartment in LA going, I'm still here waiting, is that the final scene of
it would be
the final
awesome.
episode?
I mean,
just for a laugh.
Not that he's a character, but almost just him walking somewhere on the sidewalk in Hollywood.
I'm still here.
Like maybe with the, we know there's going to be protests and stuff like that, whether it's from the Mexican community or there's also the far right movement in America, that at one of those gatherings or protests or whatever, that there is Dorian Gray ignoring it because he's seen it all before,
or
by just
Lily
walking
as a part of it, maybe
along the sidewalk or something.
Yeah, or Lily is a part of it, maybe a part of one of the protests. That would be quite interesting too, because she may go on and continue doing her protesting throughout history. That might be her lead in. But there won't be a connection to City of Angels. The story of Penny Dreadful actually does continue in comics. One of the executive producers of the show, Chris King, did take on the story and did continue it on in comic books as a comic series called Penny Dreadful Aftermath, effectively, which takes place almost immediately after the end of season 3. I've read the first volume of the story, and effectively it kind of is about 6 months after is where the story itself, the main body of the story, takes place, and it does bring in one of the other Universal monsters, which I think is a good idea. They bring in the Mummy, which is an interesting idea. Have a read of it. After getting to the end of season 3 now, this time, and seeing the end of all the characters, I do feel it's a little less necessary than I probably thought it was going to be when I was originally watching the show. I was expecting more answers and more things that it may need to wrap up, but having gotten to the end of the series, I don't think there's a need to continue the story of these characters. But if you're looking for more story, it's written by somebody that was involved in the show and was on set every single day of the 3 seasons of the show, so he knows these characters really well. So check it out if you want to get any more information and any more adventures with
absolutely
Ethan and Malcolm and Victor and Katrina and Dr. Seward's in there, and everybody's in there. So to check it out, and Mr. Lyle comes back reasonably quickly. So,
exactly.
So he's in the comics,
which is always good.
Exactly.
I think certainly for season 3, missed Mr. Lyle for sure.
Mr. Lyle, yes. Thank you so much for joining us for all of our discussions about Penny Dreadful. Wow, what a number of episodes we've done this season. We will be coming up to our 500th episode of TV Podcast Industries in just a couple of months' time, just after the end of Penny Dreadful City of Angels. After doing 27 episodes of the Penny Dreadful podcast, I'm actually not surprised we're coming up on 500 episodes after 6 years of podcasting.
I know. It's crazy.
But thanks so much for joining us for all of our discussions. I'm glad you've been enjoying them. I hope you've been enjoying them as much as we've been enjoying them. Stay subscribed to the podcast on tvpodcastindustries.com. We would love to hear from you on any thoughts you have about all of Penny Dreadful. Email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. Join us over on Twitter @tvpodindustries, or you can join us over on Instagram @tvpodcastindustries as well. Or come and join us on our Facebook group. Great Facebook group's a bit of fun. There's lots of stuff going on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, pop over to facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries. Thanks so much for joining us. John, take us out.
Yes, fellow Darklings, thank you so much for joining us. As Derek said, please stay subscribed to the podcast. But remember, we will be back very, very, very shortly with our thoughts on Penny Dreadful City of Angels, Episode 1, Santa Muerta. It airs on Showtime on Sunday, April 26th. And we will be coming with our podcast, our dreadful podcast about City of Angels, the Penny Dreadful Part 4, soon after, for sure. So cannot wait to speak to you then, because as always, it has been a pleasure speaking with you, fellow Darklings and fellow industrialists and fellow podcast listeners. Remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep screaming.
Bye.
Bye.